than Joseph. Y'all see that? They don't show this in Egyptology. Read.
And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, See, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt.
I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. Joseph was a ruler in Egypt. And that ruler, when you parallel him with Imhotep, when you parallel him with Imhotep in Egyptology, you will see that it was Joseph. Read. And it's another thing. There's a reason that out of all the kings or rulers in Egypt, they could not find Imhotep's bones or mummy. Why? Because it told you in the scriptures that Joseph made a promise. He made his children promise that when they leave when they leave Egypt, that they would take his bones out. So these excavations you go to, they talk about Imhotep because they can't deny what he brought to Egypt. But they'll never show, they'll tell you that his tomb is, they can't find his blood, his bones. Why? Because according to the Bible, Joseph was taken out of the land when Moses and the Israelites left. So now we're filling in the gaps for you here. Read on.
And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand, and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck.
So he dressed Joseph like a what? An Egyptian king. So the little things you see crossed and all that, and the headpiece and all that, that was actually an Israelite ruling in Egypt. But they won't tell you that today. Why? Because the Egyptians were very wroth or mad at the fact that they tried all their magic against Israel when the Lord sent Moses there with a stick. And Moses took them down with a stick and destroyed their chariots in the water. So because of this, the African Egyptians always had disdain against the children of Israel. So what did they do? They tried to strike Israel from all the records. And now they're trying to say that Israel never was in Egypt. Because the Pharaoh had the power to strike. If they wanted to strike you from history, they could. So now they're telling people, Moses never was in Egypt. Because of their disdain of the God of Israel that destroyed their empire with a stick. With 2 men and a stick. And took out all the children of Israel out of the land. So now we see how Joseph was able to become ruler. And when his brothers seen him, they didn't even recognize him. Why? Because he was looking and dressed like an Egyptian. So in time, when his brothers came to him, he started setting up his brothers over Egypt because his word was number 1 in all the land. The only place Pharaoh had a word was from the throne. But he trusted Joseph, so he let Joseph rule. So when his brothers came, the Israelites ruled Egypt for a specific amount of time. And it's what you call the Hyksos period. Hyksos. Now I need y'all to examine how they try to explain this one. They say, well, you wait in the car. All right. So we have the Hyksos period. Okay? Now, this is how they try to explain, because you can't deny the rulership of the Hyksos period because it was for a long period. So this is what they said. They said, well, something happened where a war broke out between the Egyptians and these Asiatics. And these Asiatics came in and ruled Egypt for a certain amount of time. And then the Egyptians took it back over. So instead of it's just admitting that that time period was from Joseph and their rulership, they lied and say that it was a people that no one knows who they are right now. Just some Asiatic people just came in Egypt and just sat there and ruled over all of Egypt, then disappeared. Right? Who explains this? Josephus. And I'm going to read this in Josephus. I'm in Josephus, Flavius Josephus against Apion. As a matter of fact, this is the first book and the 14th. The first book in the 14th part. It says, now this Manetho, and we know Manetho is an African or Hamitic historian. In the second book of the Egyptian history writes concerning us in the following manner. I will set down his very words as if I were to bring the very matter into a court for a witness. So because Manetho was pushing these lies that Israel never existed, but the Asiatic people existed instead of Israel in Egypt, Josephus said, you know what, I'm going to lay this out like a lawyer. I'm going to prove that through Manetho's words that Israel was ruling in Egypt. It says here, the whole nation was styled Hyksos, Hyksos. That is, shepherd kings. For the first syllable Hicks, according to the sacred dialect, denotes a king, and Isos, a shepherd. Now here's a question. Who are known for shepherding or abiding over the fields in Egypt? The Israelites. And where? Goshen. In Goshen, right? And it says, now, in another copy, this is Josephus, it is said that this word does not denote kings, but, on the contrary, captive shepherds. So what people were captives in Egypt? Israelites. There's something else. Manetho goes on and say, these people whom we have before named kings and called shepherds also, and the descendants, as he says, kept possession of Egypt 511 years. So the Hyksos, or the shepherd kings, ruled Europe for a specific period. Now, here's another thing. They built a city in that country which is now called Judea, and that large enough to contain this great number of men, called it Jerusalem. Now Manetho, in another book of his, says that this nation, thus called shepherds, were also called captives in their sacred books, and this account on his is the truth. For feeding of sheep was the employment of our forefathers in the most ancient ages. And it says, and as they led such a wandering life in feeding sheep, and they were called shepherds, nor was it without reason that they were called captives by the Egyptians. Since one of our ancestors, Joseph, told the king of Egypt that he was a captive, and afterwards sent for his brethren into Egypt by the king's permission. But as for these matters, I shall make a more exact inquiry about them elsewhere. So now he was filling in the gaps and showing them that according to Joseph's rule, that's how they were able to write the history of the Hyksos, because we ruled Egypt for almost 500 years.